I want you to consider for a moment this idea of what is it that God does and what is it that he does not do in the physical world. Because it's very common in religion for people to attribute various things to God, to give God credit for things which he may have not done. And I don't mean that in the sense that there are good things in the world that the Lord has not done, but rather the opposite. There are horrible tragedies that happen to individuals, and then they ask why God did this, or why has God done such and such to me. But we need to understand through the examples given in Scripture that God himself is not always responsible for every single event on the face of the earth. Specifically, for evidence of this, we look in the book of Job. Job chapter 1 and verse 21. We hear a verse that's repeated all the time in the religious world. We even sing about it in some of our songs. This is what the Bible has to say. After Job loses everything that he has, he says this in verse 21, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Now, it's important to note that because Job himself, righteous man of God, thought that God took away all of his possessions and caused the death of all his children. But actually, if we step back just a few verses in this very same chapter, we see that that's not the case. What's actually the case is that the devil himself was the one who did these things. Now, we have the recorded scriptures, so we know that. But Job did not. He didn't get this nice bird's eye view that we get of his scenario. If you step back, you look at Job, still in chapter 1, verses 6 through 12, you see God and Satan having a discussion. And then at the end, after Satan says, the only reason he's faithful to you, God, is because you've protected him and you've made him successful and prosperous, God says, behold, all that he has is in your power. This is verse 12. Only do not lay a hand on his person. And then later on, when even that wasn't enough for Satan to get Job to turn his back on God, he then was later allowed to touch his physical body and cause boils to come upon it and damage it physically. Now, I say all that to say the following. Was God directly responsible for what happened to Job's family, and then later on with what happened to Job? The answer is absolutely not. That was obviously, clearly, the action of the adversary, the action of the devil. And yet the same thing happens today. In the modern world, someone will undergo a horrible tragedy, lose a child, or something like that way too soon. And then they'll ask the question, why did God take him away? As horrible of a tragedy as that is, it's incredibly bold to suggest that the reason that child dies was because God himself took the child. That's very bold. That requires all-knowingness, that omniscience that is only available to the divine nature. As human beings, we simply cannot know those things. So what I want you to consider is be very aware and be careful with what it is that you attribute to God. Because we understand through the examples provided in Scripture that God's not always the one who is doing these things on the earth. God's not the one taking people's children. There's a natural flow of life and a horrible result of the evil that entered the world those thousands of years ago in the Garden of Eden. There's a result of that, and that result is death. And it's horrible. But it's meant to paint a picture of the horrible things that sin does to the human being and to the human life. So again, think about in yourself, think about in your own mind. Whenever you feel the urge to attribute something to God, consider that it wasn't actually God who did that, and that you could very well be dealing with simply the natural course, the natural order of the world as it has been damaged by the evils of sin, or that you are dealing with the power of the enemy. And make sure you consider that in your rational mind, because remember, the Bible clearly states that the adversary is the god of this world, little g God of this world. And that's something to think about.